First of all, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm aware that this is, as you mentioned, I mean, I can be more rude, so this is a niche topic in the sense of the whole, I mean, seeing the whole picture about Istanbul's or Constantinople's history. But still, there are some coincidences and meeting points between great Turkish intellectuals, British, Americans, Levantines, Hungarians, Poles, and so on and so on. And finally, this is a history of a 120-year-old institution. I mean, the Hungarian society. So this is something that became quite essential in the past one and a half century in Istanbul for the Hungarians and maybe also for the Central Europeans. Before starting my presentation, I wanted to outline that this will be a presentation and this is an outcome of a research that was done by me, but also György Csorba, who is with us tonight, and I would like to thank his assistance and help and his work, because one part of the talk will be built on his researches, and some part will be built on our common researches. We just published a 50-page long article on the history of the society in Hungarian, and we are planning to publish it maybe in English and Turkish in the future. So in the first part of today's talk, I will aiming at outline the history of the Hungarian migrant colony in Constantinople related to the War of Independence. Then I will highlight the golden ages of the Hungarian society before the First World War, while in the last phase I will try to concentrate on the development of the Hungarian community in the Republican era's Turkey. So until the spring of 1848, we hardly know anything about the Hungarians in Constantinople. However, the Hungarian Revolution in March mobilized the Hungarians there. Hearing the news from the home country, more than 50 of them gathered together in their hut in the coffee house in Little Campo, located in the European district of the Ottoman capital. They decided to establish a Hungarian Equality Club to defend the interest of more than 200 compatriots living there. At the same time, on 9 April 1848, a petition was signed by 50 people and sent to the Palatine, applying either for the establishment of the Hungarian nation's own diplomatic representation in Constantinople or for the formation of a separate department for the Hungarians, beside the existing Austrian consulate. Although the Austrian objection and hesitation, as well as the outbreak of the war, swept away the issue of the consulate, this event can be considered the beginning of the conscious organization and distancing of the Hungarian colony from the other nations of the Habsburg Empire living in the Ottoman capital. The petitioners' professions were also indicated. Among them, we can find an Ottoman military surgeon, a civil servant working in the Turkish imperial office, an engineer, an artist, a merchant, a piano maker, a journalist, and even a baron. The son of a baron, Balázs Orbán, also reports in his memoirs that a certain Hungarian was brewing beer in a nook of an abandoned brewery, and that many well-off Hungarian craftsmen and artisans and some merchants were living in the Turkish capital at that time. Other resources mention other artisans from that time: watchmaker, imperial shoemaker, carpenters, and an imperial coachman. Anton Komandinger, Nikitic, András Köpe, and Smith Samu Barabás, saying that they also had prosperous business and were in good financial situation. After the Hungarian War of Independence was repressed with Russian assistance, practically the only way to escape from retaliation was towards the borders of the Ottoman Empire. The first refugees entered Ottoman territory on 20 July 1849, and from August they began to arrive in large numbers, including many civilian and military leaders. The 5,500 refugees were gathered in Vidin. From there, around 3,000 people returned to Hungary at the end of October with the promise of a favorable Austrian judgment. At the beginning of November, 1,500 refugees were registered and between 400 and 600 people died in sick camp. At the turn of October and November, the Hungarian and Polish refugees were transported to Shumla from Vidin, because of the vicinity of the Russian border and the approaching winter. Then, after serious negotiations, it was agreed upon that the prominent Hungarian leaders would be relocated to Kütahya in Asia Minor. Lajos Kossuth, the leader of the Hungarian War of Independence, and his 56 comrades set out to Kütahya on 15 February 1815, where later more and more Hungarians joined them. You can see in the picture the existing Kossuth Museum in Kütahya. And on the left side, this is the moment when Lajos Kossuth arrived to the Turkish soil. Finally, on the invitation of the United States, Kossuth and his retinue left the city on 1st of September 1851 and left for Western Europe. Altogether, the estimated number of the immigrants known by name is less than 300, who were living and working in the Ottoman Empire for shorter and longer time after Kossuth had left. Our typical emigrant in 1849 is 27 years old, religion is not significant but primarily Christian, many of bourgeois and noble origin, and single. Most of the Hungarians naturally gravitated towards Constantinople because the Levantine population and the multilingual and colorful atmosphere of the city provided better odds for survival. As a global transport hub, the city offered the opportunity of leaving for any part of the world in an instant, either to fight for the freedom of Hungary, to make new start elsewhere, or to disappear. Last but not least, Constantinople was the place where they could turn to foreign consulates for help, since the immigration did not receive any protection on behalf of the Austrian Internunciatura, which nominally covered every citizen of the Austrian Empire. Moreover, many refugees were apprehended by force in both Constantinople and other Turkish cities. In the 50s and 60s, Western Europe and the United States offered more opportunities for sustenance, land acquisition, growth, and even for military careers during the time of the Italian unification and the American Civil War. In the civilian life, the refugees tried to make do in various professions. There were waiters, innkeepers, gamblers, chemists, coachmen, bakers, interpreters, engineers, farmers, and photographers. Many made successful careers. Several refugees settled down, taking mainly European or Levantine, rarely Muslim, women to wife. There are some famous Hungarian Turkish figures among their descendants, like the poetess Nigar Hamin. So it is no coincidence that the Hungarian Society of Readers and Philanthropists in Istanbul, so the Hungarian Society, was founded by 48 immigrants who arrived to the city. In his recollection, Balázs Orbán, you can see him in the picture, primarily attributed the organization of the society to himself. According to its only known record, the society was founded on the 10th of November 1850. The organization was heavily community-run and funded. The treasurer Flambauer provided the venue at his own home for a month with equipment donated by the members. According to Gustav Zerfi's secret police report of 24th of February 1851, some of the Poles in Kütahya also joined the Hungarian Society of Constantinople, listing 51 members from Constantinople, 34 Hungarians, and 20 Poles from Kütahya. The society rooms were eventually provided by Balázs Orbán in one of the buildings owned by his mother in the Tarlabashi district. Later, the society was suspended and re-established. In 1857, the secretary Fecskay gave the accommodation to the famous travelogue and Turkologist Arminius Vámbéry at the headquarters of the organization in Tatavla, now the Kurtulus district of Istanbul. At the same time, the majority eventually joined the Italian struggles in the early 60s, so there is no trace of the society's existence or operation from the 80s, 60s, and the 70s. Somehow, in the 50s and 60s, initially, most of the Hungarians found accommodation in the district called Magyarja, with uncertain etymology, north of Pera, but because of their low number, a distinct Hungarian district was not formed. They never belonged to any millets and were not religiously homogeneous. The Protestants were the most organized. They established a religious community under the name of Oriental Hungarian Protestant Colony in December 1854, which succeeded in receiving protection from the United States as well as American passports. By 1864, there were only few members left who went to the Dutch house of worship and met for social gatherings in the German Teutonia house. The earlier settled Hungarian colony helped the immigrants in finding jobs. Many cavalry officers were employed in the riding hall opened by the Belgian-born Hussar Chief Captain Karl Schwarzenberg, who himself was a refugee as well. Many became sailors and servants. Artillerist Károly Rényi established a house painter company with 6 comrades and decorated the Dolmabahcsi Palace. Another refugee trained in architecture set up a company with 12 of his comrades skilled in masonry. They undertook the building of the palace of a wealthy Armenian on the bank of the Bosporus, employing 24 immigrants and helpmates. Cester, the Sultan's Austrian-born head gardener, employed 6 refugees in the Besiktas garden. Hungarian coachmen were also much required. The former director of the arms factory in Debrecen, a certain Mateides, opened a gunsmith shop and later established a small arms factory. Many pursued their former professions, but some officers was not ashamed to even learn the cobbler's trade. Some started their own businesses with the money they bought from home or collected from here and there, and few became successful businessmen. However, most of the enterprises ended in failure, and the hardening of life made many immigrants return home or go west. In 1867, quote, the existential basis of the emigration came to an end. After 18 years of struggle and hardships, they can go home old, broken, neglecting their material interest to die, wrote Sándor Veres, the most important chronicle of the emigration. So not surprisingly, by the 60s and 70s, the 48th emigration in Turkey or Constantinople perceptibly melted away. Let me highlight some of the leading personalities of the Hungarians from the early period. So Károly Tóth-Falusi, of Transylvanian origin, fled to the Ottoman Empire as a non-commissioned officer. He opened a restaurant in Constantinople and later became the owner of the Hotel de Pest under 455th Grand Rue de Pera, so Istiklal Avenue. The hotel also appears in Karmey's work From Baghdad to Istanbul. Several immigrants got employed in the hotel. In the late 70s, on the death of Tóth-Falusi, his wife, Józefa Tóth-Falusi, and his children took on the business. The hotel was still operating at the turn of the century and served as a meeting place for the local Hungarians and a popular accommodation for Hungarians visiting the city. In 1891, the family also owned the Hotel Imperial at 45th Rue de Asmali Mesjid. On the left side, you can see a commemorative plaque that we put into the once existing buildings wall last year. It's right next to the Russian consulate. Károly Velic, also of Transylvanian origin, completed a pharmaceutical course and technical college in Vienna. From 1845, he worked as a chemist at his father's side in Torda, Transylvania. He fought as a captain during the War of Independence, and later he had to go into hiding and managed to flee to Constantinople. Following a 3-month-long service in the Turkish army, he started to work with a Swiss pharmacist called Lodermann and soon became his partner. They were dealing with the export of Oriental medicines and oil products. When Lodermann left the business, Velic took over the complete leadership. He opened a pharmacy in Yüksek Kaldırım Street in Galata under the name Velic & Company. The company mainly focused on wholesale of pharmaceuticals. He moved back to Hungary in the summer of 1862 and consigned the business to his cousin, János Czakó, who was also living in the Ottoman capitals. So you can see a picture showing his pharmacy at the Yüksek Kaldırım Street. Dániel Szilágyi was without doubt the most colorful personality among the Hungarian immigrants in Constantinople. The Calvinist divinity student fought in the Hungarian War of Independence, first as a private, later as an under-official, and after its failure, he fled to Turkey. Languages became his passion during the exile. Besides Turkish, he learned Arabic and Persian, and he had a good command on English, French, and German too. In the Crimean War, he was an interpreter with the British Army and then worked as a canteen keeper. From the money earned there, he bought a bookshop. As a bookseller, he collected a lot of Oriental rarities, and he was the first to turn his attention to the Corvinas, so the old codices taken to Istanbul during the Ottoman occupation of Hungary in the 16th century, lying hidden in Turkey. Szilágyi was in close contact with the outstanding Hungarian scholars of the century, including Arminius Vámbéry. He was of great assistance to Hungarian Orientalists and scholars visiting Constantinople, not only through his language knowledge, his familiarity with the city, and his social network, which included influential statesmen and intellectuals, for he also tracked down books and manuscripts for them. He knew well some of the leading intellectuals of the age, like Cevdet Pasha, Ibrahim Shinasi, Ahmed Vefik, and Namik Kemal, among others. The banned and therefore foreign published papers and writing of the Genç Osmanli Society found their way to the Ottoman capital through the Austrian postal service and his shop. Probably this was why he was frequently harassed by the police and then even tried to confiscate his manuscripts. After his death, the most valuable parts of his bequests was bought by the Hungarian Academy of Sciences, founding the Collectio Szilágyiana, which, with its 438 manuscripts, is still one of the most valuable sections of the Oriental collection of the Hungarian Academy. Without doubt, the Jewish Adolf Orosdy and his family became the richest. During the War of Independence in December 1848, he worked as a cartographer in the rank of lieutenant in the General Staff of the Ministry of Defense. After he had fled to the Ottoman Empire, he became Kossuth secretary in Vidin and rose to the rank of major. During that time, they compiled a Turkish grammar book together. Orosdy converted, took the name Ali, and was paid by the army for a while. He opened the shop in Galata probably in 1855, although there is no information on the origin of the capital used for that, and later he partnered with Philip Bach. Their joint trading company, which later achieved proper fame, was registered under the name of Orosdy in Constantinople on 15th April 1878, then as Orosdy Bach in Paris on the 1st of February 1888. Around the turn of the century, they established department stores in several cities of Europe, Asia and North Africa, mostly in capital cities, ports, and transport railway hubs, to ascertain that their primary Western goods would be in demand due to the dense population and the great number of the foreigners. Their Constantinople department store, called Ömer Efendi Han, was located at Bahçekapı. You can see it in the picture on the right side. Back to the history of the society. So finally, on 29th of February 1880, the papers reported the refounding of the society. Former hero of 48-49 revolution, Gerd Klapka, became the honorary president, while the president was János Czakó, the vice president Poyak, and Mór Karlovits, the secretary. The number of members at that time was 51. The papers note, by the way, that the main social conflict within the community was between workers and owners. Politics was banned from the society, meaning its operation was essentially based on the principles of the 1850s founding. Over time, however, internal strife challenged the society. In May 1888, the Hungarian carpenter Ferenc Csekei was elected president, working as a school servant due to an accident at work. It was also a spectacular sign that the local elite had virtually left the organization. Only 10 to 12 members appeared in the general meeting in July. Under Csekei, the society slowly withered. For financial reasons, it moved from Pera to Jedikule, where it was, quote, transformed into a Hungarian industrial cooperative, a workers' casino. Another milestone in the loss of authority was the fact that for the first time in many years in 1888, the society was not represented in the church or at the embassy reception on the king's birthday. However, it is symbolic that in 1892, on the occasion of the 25th anniversary of the coronation of Franz Joseph, the Hungarians of Constantinople were convened and they decided to reorganize the society at a feast. Among the members of the election were Ödön Széchenyi, the leader of the firefighter brigade, who arrived at the city in 1874 and made a successful career and stayed in the city until his death. Another important change was that the President Révai also tried to make the society a representative organization of Hungarian economic interests. The society was asked by the Hungarian Minister of Commerce in 1896 to advertise the Millennium Exhibition in Budapest, celebrating the 1000th anniversary of the foundation of Hungary. At the meeting of the society on 5th of April 1896, it was decided that an international commission will be organized in the city for this purpose, and they succeeded in setting up a 25-member body from the constituencies of Constantinople, representing all important nations. Later, however, activities seemed to wane again. For instance, it is hardly a coincidence again that after a long period of time, the organization was again re-established in the year of the repatriation of the ashes of Prince Francis Rákóczi in 1906, who died in Tekirdá and was buried in the Szent Benoit Church in Karakör. So a month before the removal of the ashes of Rákóczi, the society was re-established on the 23rd September 1906 with about 60 members. The envoy of the Minister of Trade, Imre Bálint, became the president, while Isidor Baumgartner, the director of the Constantinople branch of the Hungarian Commercial Bank and the head of the Constantinople branch of the Hungarian Museum of Commerce, became the vice president. Ödön Széchenyi became the honorary president. In his first speech, Bálint urged his compatriots to be cohesive there. I'm really sorry, I have to adjust the security system here. So sorry, but I'm in the cultural center and the security system is, yeah, it's 8:30. So back to the Bálint urged his compatriots who are more exposed, quote, who are more exposed to the slowly destruction of poison of cosmopolitanism than their compatriots living at home. So it is important for us to see in the new Hungarian society a piece of the homeland and to erect an altar to the sacred name of the Hungarian homeland, the cult of the Hungarian language and the Hungarian culture, end quote. Until this time, the society has always been led by individuals who were either 48 revolutionaries or somehow connected to the pre-dualist Hungarian society and who were strongly embedded in the society of the host environment. From then on, however, many of its leaders and members of the board were, in some form, officials of the monarchy, employed by a ministry or embassy. Thus, in essence, the organization became an unofficial socio-cultural advocacy organization of the monarchy. At the same time, the life of the society ushered in a golden age. The organization, which also enjoyed the support of the diplomatic board of the monarchy and the Hungarian state, created vibrant social life. Gatherings were regular, the society balls were increasingly echoed in the local Levantine society, and prominent Turkish personalities appeared on the occasion of celebrations in connection with the deepening cooperation between the monarchy and Turkey. The society organized a glamorous ceremony and reception every year on 15th March, where pianist Géza Hegyei traditionally gave a concert with the participation of several other artists. Balls and concerts were held regularly, and members of the society met twice a week. One of the most important means of this was the organization of Hungarian language courses, which helped not only to promote Hungarian culture, but also to gain cultural influence. Already in the winter of 1906, a language course was started for Hungarian citizens who did not speak Hungarian, as well as for common officials of embassies and consulates. During these years, the society also received significant state support, so the library of the society was also developed. On the other hand, mimicking the idea of a Turkish-German friendship house project that was planned by the Germans for the downtown of Constantinople in 1917, the Hungarian politicians wanted to negotiate with the Turkish side of building the House of Turkish-Hungarian Friendship in Constantinople and a similar building in Budapest. You can see some drawings on the upper right side, which would have been this House of Friendship. In 1918, on the occasion of the Hungarian royal couple's visit to Constantinople, that you can see on the lower part of the right side, Minister Aladár Zichy received the president of the society at the Embassy Palace, and one day later he visited the society where 300 members gathered. However, at the end of the war, the armistices and the dissolution of the Ottoman and Austro-Hungarian empires put an end to both to the activities of the society and to the presence of the Hungarians in Constantinople. As with very few exceptions, they needed to leave the city in 1990. Before moving forward in time, we must mention here Géza Hegyei, the beloved pianist of the Sultan, the entertainer of Sultan Istanbul's Levantine community, who was a leading member of the Hungarian society together with Ötön Széchenyi. As both of them married a Greek woman, they were the rare example of those Hungarian citizens who could stay at the city during the Entente occupation. Hegyi was born in Óbecse, today Serbia, in a Jewish family. Later they moved to the capital, Budapest, where he finished his studies at the conservatory. He had the possibility to work together here with Ferenc Liszt and other brilliant artists, so later he became a professional musician. Upon the invitation of György Klapka, hero of the 48th Revolution and a Hungarian businessman with strong ties to the elite of Constantinople, Hegyi arrived at the city at the end of the 80s, where he later provided with the possibility of playing in the Sultan's orchestra. He also turned to be a very famous pianist of different saloons of his time, like Teutonia or Cercle d'Orient. Here you can see, most probably it's him in a caricature made by the famous artist Hassan. But he was also heavily involved in charity organizations, with giving several concerts for free, including one in Budapest in 1916 for the Red Crescent, and one in Istanbul for the Hungarian Hospital of Constantinople. You can see some pictures of the opening of the Hungarian hospital in 1916. It took place in the foundation of the Darül Elhan and also in the modern Turkish Conservatory, where he used to teach Western music. He married to a Greek woman, Katarina Zigomala, who also became a piano lecturer and took Hegyi's place after his death at the conservatory. Moving forward, there are indications that the reorganization of the society may have begun in the year following the end of the Turkish War of Independence and the proclamation of the Republic of Turkey on 29 October 1923 and the signing of the Friendship Agreement with Hungary. Based on archival data, the Hungarian Society of Hungaria of Constantinople was officially registered on the 12th of April 1925. The foundation also coincided with the appearance of Hungarians in greater numbers who were looking for a job at the Republic of Turkey. The statutes thus stated that the aim of the society was to, quote, consolidate and organize socially all Hungarians living in Turkey, to promote their intellectual education, to promote Hungarian culture, to support the deprived Hungarians morally and financially, to support the Hungarian-Turkish fraternity, to contribute to the strengthening of Hungarian-Turkish culture and economic relations, and to organize Turkish and Hungarian courses, which virtually never happened. The presidency was held by Béla Kriszt, the technical director of the Eastern Railways. The vice president was Albert Rádi, the chief engineer of a farming company in Aksehir. The statutes also stated that the society did not deal with politics. However, it could set up branches in other cities, as was done later in Ankara. As can be seen, the society basically carried on the objective of its predecessor, defining itself as a non-political socio-cultural organization working to strengthen Turkish-Hungarian economic relations and supporting the workers who arrive in Turkey. The official formation was celebrated by the society with a large-scale ball. Géza Hegyi, who took the stage again after a long period of time, for the last time, entertained the audience with pieces of Chopin and Liszt at the ceremonial hall of the elegant Tokatlian Hotel on Grand Rue de Perrin on the 2nd of May 1925. In addition to the Hungarian ambassador Tahi, the evening was attended by representatives of the American, Belgian, Italian, German, Austrian, English, Bulgarian, and Persian embassies, as well as well-known figures of Turkish social life and members of the society. By the middle of the decade, the Hungarian was the most populous group of guest workers in the new Turkish capital in Ankara. In Istanbul, the first headquarters was at 19 Tepebaşı Street, then later moved to the 6th Alliance Street. You can see it on the left side, the current view of the street. According to a report, the society had 118 members at that time, including 21 Turkish supporters who organized weekly gatherings and monthly social dinners. They also engaged in library facilities such as reading newspapers and magazines, organizing lectures and concerts, and playing chess and table tennis. The scout team and wrestling team was also set up to educate young people and workers. The leader of the scouts was the Jesuit monk János Vendel, whose name became best known for the organization of Hungarian children's camps around Mudanya and Bursa in the summer, and for his roles in the local Scout movement. You can see one picture from such a camp and his burial place in the Ferikai Catholic cemetery. By the end of the 30s, the home of the society was at the first floor of the Luxembourg apartment at 108 Istiklal Avenue, which had been used in the later decades. You can see in the middle. In addition to organizing public cultural performances, they also had the power for charity organizations. So at Christmas, for example, 50 poor Hungarian children were endowed. The society at that time consisted mainly of iron and woodworkers, although there were also a good number of intellectuals. Quote, the home of the Hungarian society, also known as the Hungarian Club, was on the first floor of an elegant, huge building of the last century. The large building overlooked the main road of Istiklal Caddesi in the Beyoğlu district in central Istanbul. Called Pera by Europeans, the then elite quarter, with its elegant shops and cinemas, which was very European with chandeliers at the street front and antique lift and a wide marble staircase. Next to the entrance of the building was the famous and also elegant Baylan confectionery, where the finest profiteroles in Istanbul were made. The club consisted of a large and medium-sized hall. They had white tables and upholstered chairs. Each of large windows was covered with velvet curtains. At one end of the larger hall was a stage with a magnificent theater curtain. At the other end of the room, a statue of Prince Rákóczi was clearly visible on a high pedestal. The society had a little piano, a well-equipped radio with a turntable, and a heavily used ping-pong table. There was also a library of about 250 or 300 books. The favorite hobby of the Hungarians was playing chess. There was also a small office and well-equipped kitchen in the club, which served as a buffet for some events. Thanks to the caretaker couple, dinners were also prepared in this, which did a good service to the unmarried club members. The most important events in the society's calendar were the national holiday of 15th of March, the feast of St. Stephen was 20th of August, and the Christmas holidays in December. At such times, the directorate employed musicians, waiters, and dressers. The kitchen at these events was like a beehive. There were masquerade balls in March, tea parties on Saturdays, and also film screenings were held regularly. End quote. However, the Hungarians were also affected by the Second World War and the Wells tax of 1942. At that time, the organization was already called as the Istanbul Hungarian Benevolent Society. In addition to the economic difficulties after the war, the Soviet occupation of Hungary and the establishment of the communist dictatorship naturally affected the life of the society. However, most of the Hungarians who fled to Turkey during and after the World War II left the country over time. So the base of the society steadily declined. Hundreds of Hungarians who arrived after 1956 revolution did so, although many settled in the Turkish capital forever. However, the arrival of 56 immigrants made upside down the status quo around the Hungarian club. The newcomers, led by former president of Lothar Köves, Béla Nagy, and Károly Somogyvári, founded the Hungarian Freedom Fighters Association in March 1957, trying to merge the Hungarian club and reorganize it under the name of Association of Free Hungarians. Although this attempt was not successful, according to Donat, the communist covert agent who was spying on the society. Elizabeth Childers, the daughter of Antoine Köppe, recalled the events such as, quote, we were the Hungarian colony, we were white Hungarians, and our club on Istiklal Caddesi over the pastry shop Gloria was a huge flat with living cook and his wife, and open all day for anyone to stop, relax, and play ping pong, eat. There was also a stage. We carried all the traditions, and eventually Fodor became the president of the Free Hungarians of Turkey. We had no contact with the consulate because they were the Red Hungarians, and they had none with us. When Fodor retired from his position to move to the USA, he received a letter of thanks and appreciation from the United Nations. So here I may say some words on the aforementioned Antoine Köppe, because this Levantine family is really linked to this city in many matters. So the story of the Köppe family begins in the Tanzimat era, a period of westernizing reforms in the empire, when the paths of András Köpe and Leokádi Talibar intersected in Constantinople. Born and raised in a village near to the city of Brașov in Hungarian Transylvania, András Köpe fled to the Ottoman capital due to pressure from the Austrian Empire. Leokádi Talibar, whose family was from Brittany, was in the city accompanying her two brothers, Louis, a watchmaker and jeweler, and Pierre, an architect. The couple married in 1842 and later took over the watch and jewelry shop, which was situated in the district of Karaköy. In 1882, their second child, Charles, married Rosemary Marcopoli, who was coming from a Levantine family of Genoese origin in Trabzon. They had 6 children with Charles: Charlotte, Ida, Taib, Ferdinand, Antoine, and Eugene. Educated in French, the 6 siblings never became Ottoman subjects and remained citizens of the Austro-Hungarian Empire, while at the same time became notable members of the empire's Levantine community. Taib went to the Brașov short after the beginning of the war in 1914 and joined the military of the dual monarchy. Antoine followed in his brother's footsteps and enlisted 2 years in Istanbul, serving as a soldier in Syria and Palestine, where he witnessed key battles in 1917. When the war ended and both empires entered respective stages of dissolution, the majority of the Köpe family stayed in Istanbul and witnessed the armistice, the Paris Peace Conference, as well as the occupation of the city by the French, British, and Italian forces. As well, Antoine lived difficult times in following years and later worked in small towns like Zonguldak, Sivas, and Kayseri, while he and his family was witnessing the first decades of the newly founded republic. Though he spent all of his life in the Ottoman Empire and Turkey, even in the early 40s, he sent his children to study in Hungary and supported their efforts to learn Hungarian. As the outcome of the World War II, the xenophobia in Turkey significantly increased and Hungary was taken over by the communists. Hence, the family finally found no other way than to move and settle down in the United States, where the grandsons of the Köpes still live. There was a very nice exhibition on the history of the Köpe family last year in Istanbul, and here you can see the book that we published together with other writers on the archive of the Köpe family, which is really amazing. According to the contemporary account of Hungarian sailor György Badacsonyi, the Hungarian club had 70 members even at the end of the 1950s, and the society was still based in the building along the Grand Rue de Paix. Quote, the club consists of one large room, including chairs, tables, a battered piano, 2 kitchen pictures of the landscape of Hortobágy, a dusty Rákóczi statue, and 70 homeless Hungarians. End quote. According to Mr. Ürményházy, in 1959, while according to Elizabeth Childs, sometime in 60 or 61, the 110-year-old society finally closed its doors with the depletion of material and human resources. However, the dissolution of the society did not mean the complete disappearance of a small group of Hungarians. Fodor remained in Turkey until his death in 1971 and continued organizing community programs. The community held its gatherings in the garden of the church in Ayaspasha that once existed as a center of Jesuits in Turkey and which later became the center of the Syrian Catholic Patriarchate. Books and the archive of the society that were at the disposal of Wendel finally were sold for kilo after his death and ended up in the hand of a well-known antique shop owner, Nedret Isli, who, according to Géza Dávid, a former head of the Department of Turkish Philology at Eötvös Loránd University, offered them for sale for $2,000 in the 90s. 2 years ago, when I reached Mr. Isli, he reported that the archive has scattered since, so I was not able to find any of the aforementioned documents. So to summarizing my today's talks, we have to say that the Hungarian Society of Constantinople, founded in 1850, represented Hungarians in the Eastern metropolis for 110 years with longer and shorter interruptions. The story that began with the Hungarian Revolution and War of Independence in 1848-49 ended a few years after the 1956 revolution, thus providing an excellent framework for the institutional presence of the Hungarians in Istanbul. The history of the Hungarian society was a kind of a reflection of all-time Hungarian political, economic, and cultural life, as the organization, which grew out from the 40 years tradition, gradually became the economic and cultural representative of the Hungarian side of the monarchy. But just as Hungary recovered from the trauma of Trianon and the loss of the World War I, the society began a new life, and from the 20s onwards represented the increasing number of Hungarian guest workers who were living in the new capital, Ankara, in addition to Istanbul. However, losing another world war pushed the two countries, Turkey and Hungary, into separate blocks that made any further initiatives impossible, thus condemning the organization with a long history to a slow decline. For a short period of time, the society was the meeting place and home of personalities such as Arminius Vámbéry, Count Ödön Széchenyi, Dániel Szilágyi, Géza Hegyei, or Antoine Köppe. But in addition to the noble and intellectual members, even a desperate tailor or a factory worker was able to find hot food and some Hungarian words at the building of the society. And here I would like to thank you for your attention.
Excellent, Gábor. Thank you very much indeed for that fascinating talk. So if you'd like to stop sharing, we'll just...
Yeah, me too. Okay.
So we can see people. Well done. So now we're open to questions, comments, use the chat, use use the raise hand function. If I just go with a sort of general question, just to go back, can you just take us back? What was the state of relations between the Ottoman Empire and Hungary in the 1840s?
In the 1840s, there was not really an institutional relation because Hungary became the part of the dual monarchy, so there was no independent foreign policy. So this is one of the reasons that we cannot really trace the Hungarians in Istanbul, because it's really hard to find out that even though they are the members of the monarchy, local community of the monarchy, but from which country and which nation. So a lot of Hungarians spoke fluently German, so it is impossible to say that he was Hungarian or German. And the names can also be a little bit tricky, like very many Hungarians holding or used to hold German names. So there was no institutional connection. But of course, after the 48th Revolution and the arrival of the community, the emigres, it changed. And of course, mainly after the 67 compromise between the two parts of the monarchy, so the Austrian and the Hungarian part, Hungary had an independent foreign policy, not independent, but still there was a foreign policy. In 20-30 years, the bilateral relations changed in many ways, and the two countries, one part of the monarchy and the Ottoman Empire, became one of the best, allies and friends in many terms.
Okay, thank you. Foreman.
Yeah, thank you very much for what is really a very rich history of the local Hungarian community of Istanbul. What I was going to ask, like you've in part already answered it, I suppose, but maybe I can just ask you to clarify more specifically. So when you say Hungarian, you are concentrating on those people who have official Hungarian passports, or are you concentrating more on those people who see themselves as an organized community of Hungarian nationals? Because like I don't know if I missed some, but like most of the names I've seen now, they tend to be like what, at least to my naive ears, seems to be Hungarian. but there was also, as like one famous Hungarian in Istanbul, Max Fruchtermann, who is a Hungarian by passport. So because of you focusing on these Hungarian organizations, are you looking more at like people who themselves claim to be Hungarians, or are you looking at
mostly this is the case, and also, I mean, we are trying to concentrate on the Hungarian language sources, because these ones are rarities, and those Hungarians who are, you know, who mentioned other Hungarians, you can most probably be sure that they won't like telling the stories about Austrians or those who claim themselves Austrians or Germans. So yeah, this is a very, I mean, a fluid question, that who is Hungarian and who is not. But for example, I mentioned the name of Kommandinger, who was a famous piano maker, and even though his name is what sounds like a German or Austrian, he claimed himself a Hungarian. He was the one who hosted Franz Liszt when he visited the city in 1847. And then he also became the member of the Hungarian Society. But later, I mean, in the 20s, for example, Turkish members also appeared in our sources. So it's also interesting to see who is willing to be a member of a Hungarian society as a Turk. Most probably they were just, you know, they were Turks who went to learn in Hungary. I skipped this question because it was too long, but in the 1910s, hundreds of Turkish young students were sent to Hungary to learn in different universities or institutions. So most probably they were the Turks who then later returned to Turkey and became the member of the Hungarian society.
Je veux dire quelque chose.
So, who else has a comment or question? Thank you, Joanna Fodor, just to draw people's attention to a publication.
Thank you very much for this very
I want to
interesting
talk to them. How do I do
conference. I guess our friends should right. So I'm here because I'm interested in printing. I'm working on printing, and as you know, Constantinople, Istanbul was a hub for printing, and I wonder if in a previous period of your research, you have looked into Ibrahim Müteferrika, obviously. And first of all, if it's come across your own interests, research interest, and second, if I haven't heard the word printing in anything that you have said, were they interested in the fact that the first press to print in Arabic type was done by somebody born in Transylvania who was a Hungarian and probably a Protestant at first before becoming a Muslim? Is there anything in your research?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that for us it's now kind of a fact that most of the Turks also know Ibrahim Müteferrika, and most probably they also know that he has some Hungarian origins, so coming from Transylvania, became a Muslim, and so on. But his story was not really well known up to the 20th century. So when the Hungarian Science Institute in Constantinople was founded in 1916, some of the members started researching Ibrahim Müteferrika's story, and the aforementioned Daniel Szilágyi, who had this bookshop, he was the one who drew attention first to the Hungarians' attention to Ibrahim Müteferrika. So I haven't came across any kind of references to him in the early period, so to say, before the First World War. Maybe judge or can say something if he wants, because he knows better the early periods archival materials. But Ibrahim Müteferrika was not really well known until the 20th century. But on the other hand, the society some very vague printing, or I don't really know, because the prints were lost, but they had some newspapers. So we know from the sources that they printed newspapers for the local Hungarians, but none of the pieces have survived. So we don't know too much about these journals.
Okay, so for Laszlo,
yeah, Laszlo Bey.
Just need to unmute you. We just need to participants.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you.
All right, thank you. My question is this: for the record, I would like to mention that our family and my brother-in-law was involved in the Hungarian Association as in different capacity, president, etc.
Yeah.
Between 1940 and 1960, approximately.
Mm-hmm.
Probably are ever, according to your records. Do you confirm?
Yeah, I mean, I can know the exact numbers. It was very hard to find out because the memoirs are a little bit colliding sometimes. Okay. So
the names are Ürményházy.
Yeah, I know his gravestone in Feriköy, so we are visiting.
Yes. And the second one is Haladar.
Yeah, Haladar. Yeah,
that's correct. My brother-in-law.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Can I just say one thing? In the Hungarian Society in Istanbul, there are two pictures. One is of 3 children on a stage. Well, I'm sitting next to one of them.
Okay. Yeah, it was from the report.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for this talk.
Yeah, I cut it from a report that was made by one of the Hungarian newspapers with Mr. László's brother.
Okay.
Köszönöm szépen.
Szívesen.
Any other questions or comments? Otherwise, I've got another one, if I may. When the emigres came to Istanbul after 1849, you mentioned that there were quite a few soldiers and that some actually joined the Ottoman army. Yeah. Were there enough to form their own sort of group or regiment, or as there were with the Poles, and did they fight in the Crimean War?
Not really. I mean, they joined. We just opened up a new part of a museum in Kars where some battles happened during the Crimean War, where Hungarians fought. So Hungarian emigres who joined the Ottoman army, fought with the English side by side against the Russians, but like individually, or so to say, 5-10 person maximum. But there was no individual Hungarian regiment, even though in the very first part of the Hungarian Revolution in 1848, some Hungarians wanted to create a Hungarian regiment and go to fight. But this was like, the Ottoman authorities didn't want to let them go, because it would, of course, cause some problem with the Russians or the Austrians. And also in the 78-79 Russo-Turkish War, some Hungarians wanted to go for fight with the Turks with a small Hungarian regiment. But it was also, it never happened later. it's most probably it's you know, the problem was the low number of the Hungarians. So some hundreds of people, most of them are not soldiers, were not soldiers, so it's not enough to set up any kind of, you know, battalion that would make any difference in any battle.
And were the low numbers a factor in why the society came in and out of existence during the mid-19th century? Was it just that people disagreed with each other and there weren't enough to form a coalition?
It's very common in Hungary, as we always saying, but yeah, most probably. And as I mentioned, so the pulling and pushing factors were really different in every decade. So after the 48th revolution, the Hungarians wanted to fight again if it would have started again against the Russians. But then they went to the Italian front, they went to the United States. So the human capacity has been always melted, and the newcomers to meet and to catch up with the newcomers. It's always a question of how to cooperate your own society. And as there was very few people who were really respected by the Turks. I mean, some of them who are mentioned, like Géza Hegyei, the pianist, or Ödön Széchenyi, the firefighter brigade captain. But very few were really like part of the Turkish society, in a sense that they could like, you know, pushing down every kind of revolutionary attitudes of the members. And then there was always a dispute between the revolutionaries and the anti-revolutionaries. So this society should be a revolutionary hub, or should be a non-political social cultural hub.
And I was going to sort of follow on with that, because I think you said at the beginning, when it was established, I think they called it the Equality Club.
Yeah.
And was that based on the 7 sort of principles from the revolution in 1848, you know, trying to recreate something very democratic, just that in the end they found they couldn't agree on?
Yeah. Yeah, so in the first 10 years, the society was founded and refurbished like 3 or 4 times. It's very hard to follow up what happened, but the problem was always that some of the emigres, if they drank too much, they started to shouting that Austrians go hell, and then the police came, and so that was there's a very nice archival material and a source that's saying that this was a very rare event, that there was no fight after the reunion of the Hungarian society in the 1850s.
But on paper, did any of those sort of equality principles that were put into the constitution of the first club, did they ever persist in the recreations of the club in later generations, in principle?
We have very limited information about this first period. Only some, some information from newspapers and some lines from different kind of memoirs. But unfortunately, there's no real archival materials, because it's lost. And also the police, I mean, due to the Austrian pressure, the police, I skipped these questions, but 2 or 3 times the police just, arrived to the headquarters of the Hungarian club and confiscated everything that was there, and beat the members, and the Austrians were happy with that, because of this, the revolutionary spirit was a little bit on a lower level.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions, comments? Just see if I've got. No. So, okay, well, look, if there's nothing else, then so someone on chat was saying, how can we obtain your article? I think. Oh, and Ediz, you've got a question as well. So, Gábor, if you answer the article,
I will write my email address and then I can send it.
Yeah.
Shall I go?
Yeah,
Shall
go.
I go? Okay, cool. So thank you for the presentation. My question is related to the Hungarians' religious identity. When you talk about the Hungarian society, were they mostly Catholic or Protestant, or there was a balance? They get along? Did they live in the same neighborhood? This is what I'm interested in.
Yeah. As you mentioned, mostly Protestant, but some of them was Catholic. Of course, there is a division between, the Protestants were mostly with the Turks and against the Austrians, and the Catholics were mostly pro-Austrian. But they were, most of them were living together in the same district, same street. In the first period. Later, we are very limited information of the Hungarian community where they lived. We only know their gravestones. So there are some gravestones in the Protestant cemetery and in the Catholic cemetery. So we can see from the numbers that most probably it's like 50-50 or a little bit like the Protestant majority, so to say. But if we go through the history of the society, we cannot see that Protestants or Catholics, the fault lines were not between the Catholics and the Protestants, but those who were pro-Austrians or anti-Austrians or workers and shop owners, or those who wanted to cooperate with the local consulate of the monarchy, or those who were anti-monarchists. So mostly, I can say that mostly political division was visible in the society. But also the Protestants were a little bit more. So they founded different organizations in the early times. In the 50s, 60s, they founded an own club, a different club, and associations. So they were a little bit more organized.
Oh, cool. Follow-up question. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'm doing a PhD on the Roman Catholics in Istanbul. Mm-hmm. That's why I'm very curious.
Yeah, please.
That's why I'm really curious about. Do you know where their community, their church was? Because I remember you mentioning the Ayaspasha Jesuit church, but was it a Hungarian church or
no?
Okay.
There wasn't any Hungarian church. Mostly they attended the masses in the Saint Antoine church in the Istiklal, and also the Santa Maria de Draperis, which is very close also. Yes. And it's an interesting moment that during the First World War, when the capitulation came to end, there was a plan by the Hungarian government to take over the Santa Maria de Draperis church from the Italians, because they saw that they will be kicked out from the Ottoman Empire. So it's time for the German Catholics and the Hungarian Catholics to take over the properties of the Russians and the Italians all over the Ottoman Empire. So also in Jerusalem and in Istanbul, but this plan never happened. But even one Hungarian monk was sent to Istanbul for this purpose to see how the development will happen, and if there is a chance, just take over some churches for the Hungarians.
That's crazy interesting to me. So I'm really fascinated by this. Could you suggest a book maybe that is focusing on what you just said, or some author who works on this area?
Yeah, but most of them were written in Hungarian, unfortunately. But I will think it over, and please, I wrote my email address. If you can write me an email later, I will send you if I have something in this topic.
Okay, yes, definitely, definitely.
Most probably there are some English publications about this issue.
Or could be in French or Italian.
Okay.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And Edis, if you, send the same email to us, if we can help, identify sources for your PhD, in other languages, maybe if you write to Craig Enser, secretary at levantineheritage.com, Craig may be able to connect you.
Yeah, that would be perfect, because what I'm trying to do is to contact like individual religious orders, or I get a fellowship last 3 months. I was in France and I was trying to find information there, and it's really hard to gather all the information for the 19th century especially. So that would be perfect. Thank you very much.
Okay. Just back to you, Gábor. What's your next sort of focus of research? Are you working on something now? Have you got plans for anything? Is there anything where we or our audience can help in any way?
Yes, there's always something on the table. I've just published my book in Hungarian, as you mentioned, about this Hungarian Science Institute in Constantinople, and between 1916 and 1918. So this is my next plan, to publish it in Turkish or in English, and also with some friends we have researches on different Hungarian personalities in the Ottoman Empire. So when you asked about, or some of our colleagues asked about who were the Hungarians, it's really hard to say, because there's a man who became a dervish. So he arrived to Istanbul as a not a refugee, but a newcomer in the 70s, 80s, and he became a dervish and lived here as a Turk. So it's very hard to find the traces of those people who melted into the local community.
Well, certainly, if you send names through, we can post an information request in our next newsletter. Who knows? You may get lucky. Someone will recognize the name. Any other last questions, thoughts, comments from the audience? No. Well, I'll wrap up, but just say thank you so much. I really appreciate you spending the time with us and taking through this little known area, but very interesting field. Good luck with all your future projects. If we can help, we'd be very glad to. Please stay in touch. Please come to our future events.
Thank you very much.
To our audience, thank you so much for joining us. And I hope you'll join us again at one of our future talks. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's been an honor for being the guest, and wish you the best. See you next time.
All right. Good night.